Chapter 1. An Introduction to Introversion, and Why It Can Make You an Excellent Expat. 1/3 to 1/2 of the world's population is introverted. But even with such a large demographic, introverts remain largely misunderstood. Over the last several years, introversion has become a trendy topic, but along with the accurate information available, there are also many misconceptions surrounding introverts too. To set the record straight, we need to clear the slate, and the first thing we need to do is understand what introversion is not. What introverts are not. Introverts are not shy, timid, reticent, depressed, aloof, unhappy, boring, rude, antisocial, unsocial, special, smarter, better, or more creative than anyone else. Some of these words can be used to describe a personality or an emotional state. Some of these words can even describe someone else's perception of you. But none of those terms have much to do with introversion itself. And while it's true that introverts can have these qualities, it's not because they're introverts. What is introversion really about? Introversion is neither a personality type nor an emotional state. Imagine a spectrum, and on one end there's introversion, and on the opposite end there's extroversion. Everyone falls somewhere along this spectrum, and according to Carl Jung, no one is exclusively introverted or extroverted. We all have both, but one of the two is usually more dominant in each person. It goes without saying that introverts are the people who are further down the introverted spectrum. But what does introversion or extroversion mean exactly? Introversion or extroversion identify how certain individuals become stimulated and energized. Introverts feel stimulated and energized by solitude, while extroverts look to social stimulation to get their engines going. But why is that? To understand this key difference between introverts and extroverts, let's take a look at the brain, specifically the neocortex. Neo means new, and cortex could be understood as the roof of the brain. This is an area of the brain which allows us to think before we act. A super important evolutionary development, right? The neocortex requires activation and arousal to work properly, and if it's overstimulated, it's harder for you to think clearly before you act. So, too much stimulation means you'll have a dysfunctional neocortex. The same is true if you're understimulated. Now at this point, you're probably starting to connect the dots. Extroverts must have too much stimulation, and introverts don't have enough stimulation. But the exact opposite is actually true. Introverts have too much stimulation within themselves, and in order to help their neocortex function properly, they require lower amounts of outside stimulation. Their inner world is already pretty loud and crowded. Extroverts, on the other hand, tend to not have enough neocortex arousal, and that's why they seek outside stimulation in the form of social activities. Too often we judge introverts by their outward appearance and think they're checked out and disengaged. What we fail to realize is that they may be more engaged than the rest of us. The reason behind an introvert's preference for quiet and solitude is not because they're bored or rude. It's simply because their neocortex is buzzing, and being alone helps them lower their level of arousal. Understanding stimulation when it comes to introverts. It's easy to oversimplify introverts and think that they just don't like a lot of social interaction, but stimulation isn't just about social engagement. Stimulation includes all 5 senses. So, things like lightning, smells, and noise can sometimes be too stimulating for introverts. The 7 essential features of introverts. You now know what introversion isn't, and you also know that introverts seek solitude, not because they hate people and are antisocial, but because being alone is exactly what their brain needs to function optimally. Now let's discuss the 7 essential features of an introverted person. At first, they might not seem very advantageous for expats, but once you look a little closer, you'll see that these characteristics are incredibly useful for introverted travelers. Introverts are creative people. Creativity might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you try to describe an introvert. Maybe that's because we have stereotypical ideas of dramatic and famous artists and creatives. Yet the research of 2 psychologists, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and Gregory Feist, indicates that in many fields, the people who are the most creative are in fact the introverts. Is it because introverts are naturally more creative or talented? Not necessarily. The strong streak of creativity within introverts can probably be attributed to their comfort and ease within solitude, a key ingredient for any creative undertaking. You're a creative expat. Once you leave your home country, you're not going to have all the usual comforts that familiarity brings. You have to start from scratch and find friends, jobs, apartments, and new favorite spots too. And just to make things fun, you'll have to overcome a language barrier as well. But cheer up for the challenge. You're in good company. Other creative introverts include Guy Kawasaki, Lady Gaga, Marilyn Monroe, Jimi Hendrix, and J.K. Rowling. Introverts are divergent thinkers. If an introvert could choose between a philosophical discussion and small talk, they're going to opt for philosophy over precipitation levels. Why is that? Introverts love to spend time grappling with ideas and concepts. This love for profound thinking, combined with their knack for creativity, leads to divergent thinking. That means introverts can come up with unique solutions. You're a divergent thinking expat. Seeing that you've already done what most people haven't and left home to explore a new country, you're already writing your own rules and figuring it out as you go. This won't stop once you land, and you'll figure out ways to make this new international life work for you. You'll figure out life hacks when it comes to traveling, eating, communicating, and so much more. You're in good company. Other divergent thinking introverts include Albert Einstein, Bill Gates, Steve Wozniak, and Larry Page. Introverts are powerful observers. Introverts might be the quiet ones in the crowd, but that doesn't mean they're not picking up on the many details that fill the room. Their observational skills help them pick up on social cues, social norms, body language, facial expression, vocal tones, and intonation. For an introvert, people watching is more entertaining than entertaining others. You're an observant expat. As an introvert, you've always been good at observing your surroundings, but this skill will be incredibly useful when you start living abroad. You'll have an easier time integrating if you can observe cultural nuances and differences. No one expects introverts to stop being themselves simply because they're in a new country, but being observant can help you be respectful of and adapt to new norms. You're in good company. Other observant introverts include Warren Buffett, Isaac Newton, and W.B. Yeats. Introverts are sensitive to their surroundings and to other people. Because introverts are such powerful observers, they notice details in their surroundings and in the behavior of those around them. This can make them more attuned with other people. Nonetheless, it's the one-on-one interactions that they thrive in. It isn't that introverts have greater capacity for compassion or empathy, because let's face it, not all introverts are saints and angels. But in general, an introvert's sensitivity to what's happening around them makes them more aware of the underdog. They can support those who are suffering because they've noticed them in the first place. Sensitivity can help you as an introverted expat. In your old stomping grounds, you knew your favorite spots and probably had well-established friendships. Now that you're out of that comfort zone, being sensitive to your surroundings is going to help you identify areas that you thrive in. You'll also be able to find people to befriend. You're in good company. Other sensitive introverts include Mother Teresa, Friedrich Chopin, Dr. Seuss, and Audrey Hepburn. Introverts are strong and overcome challenges. Since most of the United States and part of the westernized world value extroverted qualities, and since 1/3 to 1/2 of the population is introverted, it's already a challenge for introverts to thrive in social environments. But apart from the challenge of being an introvert in an extroverted world, introverts use their skills of observation, creativity, sensitivity, and divergent thinking to overcome all the other obstacles they face throughout their daily life. You're a strong expat. You might like solitude, but that doesn't mean you escape or hide from the unavoidable challenges of living abroad. Having to deal with immigration processes, or learning a new language, or simply living without your favorite foods can be hard for anyone, introvert or extrovert. Your natural introverted qualities will help you brave the storm. You're in good company. Other strong introverts include Barack Obama, Abraham Lincoln, and Rosa Parks. Introverts can form strong connections. Everyone needs human connection, but because social interactions can be overstimulating for introverts, they tend to be more selective in who they choose to socialize with. So, introverts might not have dozens and dozens of friends, but they might have a handful of close confidants who they share meaningful moments with. Remember, introverts value the exploration of ideas and concepts, and friendships that allow for this are invaluable for introverts. You're a connected expat. Maybe you already know people in your new home country, or maybe you're having to start from zero. If the latter is true for you, it could be difficult to make friendships depending on the social norms of the new country. And since you might not be interested and/or very good at small talk, it might be hard to network and branch out. But when you believe that you can find exactly the right people to interact with, you will find them. Remember, you're already very observant, creative, and divergent, so you can apply these skills to find the perfect people to spend time with. You're in good company. Other connected introverts include Mark Zuckerberg, Hillary Clinton, and Laura Bush. Introverts tap into the power of solitude and quiet. In a world that's becoming increasingly distracted and busy, there's one group of people who are unlikely to get swept away: the introverts. Not only do they prefer solitude and quiet, but they actually need it to thrive. It is in their solitude that they can come to terms with difficult problems or concepts. It's in those quiet, seemingly unproductive moments that introverts are the most original. And introverts can stand as a wonderful example of how to unplug and step away from the whirlwind of the busy world and enjoy being turned off for a while. You're a quiet expat. One thing's for certain: when you live in a foreign country and don't have many connections, or at least not as many connections as you had back home, being alone may be relatively easy for you. You can probably go to a cafe and stay a while, unrecognized by the clientele and staff. You can probably meander through your town without having to socialize very much. In short, being an expat means you'll have lots of opportunities to be alone, which is your preferred and natural habitat anyways. You're in good company. Other quiet introverts include Mahatma Gandhi, Moses, and Buddha. Being an introvert means that you have a great capacity to be a creative and divergent thinker, as well as observant and sensitive. What's more, you are totally capable of overcoming challenges, forming strong connections, and tapping into the power of solitude and quiet. You get to take all of these traits with you wherever you go. By doing so, you will take advantage of your introverted qualities and thrive as an expat. Don't lock yourself into your identity as an introvert. We've just spent some time discussing the 7 essential features of an introvert and why these characteristics can be so helpful to you as an expat. But before we close this chapter, it's important to remember that although you can identify as an introvert, try not to limit your identity to being an introvert. That can hold you back from growing and thriving in another country. You see, even if you identify as an introvert, you are not only introverted. Everyone falls somewhere along the introverted-extroverted spectrum, and we all have both introversion and extroversion inside of us. Sometimes, depending on the situation, you act in an extroverted way. Perhaps your professional responsibilities require this from time to time. Sometimes the passions of introverts override their introverted nature and allow them to share their passions. Think of great politicians like Barack Obama, or businessmen like Warren Buffett, or internationally acclaimed artists like Steven Spielberg. These people have had to engage in the public eye, and they've done it very well, even though they are all introverts, and you can do the same. As an introverted expat, you might need to interact in loud, buzzing gatherings, which are not your preferred stomping ground, in order to socialize in your new country. You can do that and even act extrovertedly. But don't worry, when it's all said and done, you can go back home and return to what feels more natural to you. Is your new country introverted or extroverted? Now, stereotypes are not helpful, but sometimes it's possible to identify cultural norms that identify a country as more introverted or extroverted. Depending on which country you're headed to, you might have an easier time being your introverted self. If you're an American introvert, you already know how difficult it can be to be yourself in your home country. Peppy, chatty customer service is a must, and overt friendliness and small talk is normal. This may be the case for you if you come from another country too. Before you head off to your new home country, try to do some research to identify if the overall culture suits introverts or extroverts, or both. For example, introverts may feel more at home in a country like Germany or Japan, rather than Italy or Brazil. If you're already planning to move to an introvert-friendly country, you're in luck. If you're headed to boisterous, gregarious places, make a concerted effort to support your needs for solitude and quiet, to prevent burnout and breakdowns.